G'day and welcome to ReDriven, and welcome to part one of our top 5 track day cars series. Now, just like our previous Fast Wagons series, the link for which is just up there somewhere, each week we're going to be covering a different price point of track day cars, and this week we're kicking things off with the $0 to $15,000 list. And even though we're talking Aussie dollars here and the Australian used car market, we have done our best to keep these cars as internationally available as possible. Also, we found that all too often people seem to think that the best track day car is the fastest car, but quite often the fastest car isn't the most reliable car. So it's one thing to rock up to the track in some 500 horsepower weapon of a thing, but if it's only good enough to get you 1 or 2 laps of the track before the engine blows up, well, that's just no fun. So, while the cars on this list, they might not necessarily be the fastest, if they have been maintained correctly, they should be reliable, and the cost to keep them running all day long for lap after lap should be pretty affordable. And we're also talking cars that can be driven to and from the track, and when they're not at a race circuit, can be used on a daily basis. These are not outright race cars. That's a whole other can of worms that will open up in the near future. Oh, also, even though this list is in numerical order, there is no outright winner as such. Each number or each place just represents a different subgenre or category of cars. So kicking things off and representing the small front-wheel drive category, it's the Honda Civic. Now look, it's all good and well just suggesting a Honda Civic, but with so many generations and models to choose from, what are the picks at this budget? Well, the obvious choice would be to go for a 2007 to 2011 FN2 Type R, but finding good examples for under $15,000 these days is becoming more and more of a challenge. Look, yes, there are Type Rs out there for less than 15 grand, but their condition could be interesting. Still, you'll get that glorious K20 engine mated to a perfectly notchy manual transmission, and depending on the spec, you could possibly even get an LSD, and you'll want the LSD. You'll get Recaros and a near-perfect driving position, all wrapped in a relatively light and small 3-door hatch body. Or you could go a little bit more old school, yet proven time and time again, and get yourself into an EG or an EK generation Civic. Forget the serious factory stuff like the EK9 Type R. Those things are well and truly out of this budget. But for a little bit less than $15,000, you could get yourself into a nicely set up EG or EK Civic, or for even less, for under $5,000, you could pick up a bog stock lower spec model with money left over to turn it into a serious track weapon. Okay, yes, look, these things are getting a little bit long in the tooth, and they may be a challenge for some to use as a daily driver, but as Lotus founder and genius race engineer Colin Chapman famously quoted, subtracting weight makes you faster everywhere, and there aren't many better contenders that fit that requirement at this budget more than these earlier Civics. Plus, being so light means that the Civic will be easier on the consumables, and add in that there are a seemingly endless array of different tuning and engine swap options, brake and suspension setup alternatives, and the fact that the support and sheer amount of parts available from the aftermarket scene is absolutely huge. But the Civic that we would go with, because they're super fun when they're set up for the track while also being lovely to drive every day, is the 2006 to 2011 Civic Sport, or for those of you in other markets, it's the Acura CSX. Yes, in standard trim, these things aren't going to be setting the track on fire anytime soon, but with the pricing starting out at around about $5,000, you'll have plenty of money left over to breathe on the engine, the suspension, the brakes and the tyres. And being a Honda, like all of the Civics mentioned, the build quality and reliability, even after days on track, should be superb. Now, we need to add in a bit of an honourable mention here. If the Civics don't float your boat, check out the Suzuki Swift Sport. Depending on when you're watching this, we may have released our full review of the Swift Sport, and it is worth a watch if you want an affordable yet immensely talented little performance car. Okay, next up, it's the sports car / coupe contender, and it's one that's often forgotten. It's the Toyota Celica, or the Celica. Both pronunciations are correct. We call it the Celica here, you might call it the Celica there. They're both right. As we mentioned at the start, look, it's all good and well to have some fire-breathing track day weapon, but to finish first you have to finish. And being a Toyota, chances are you'll finish over and over again, as these things are renowned for just going forever. Like the Civic, the Celica, or the Celica, has been available in a host of various flavours over the last 50 years, but the one to get at this price point is the 7th and final generation T230. The critics will dismiss these due to the front-wheel drive platform, but again, like the Civic, the Celica is relatively lightweight, it handles supremely well, especially with some quality suspension and tyres fitted, was designed from scratch to be a sports car, so it offers excellent feel and feedback, and the near bulletproof 2ZZ GE engine loves to rev, making it a magnificent choice for track days. Plus, thanks to Honda Integras and various BMW coupes drawing far more attention, many have forgotten or just ignored just how good the Toyota coupe can be, meaning that getting behind the wheel can be super affordable. Here in Australia, pricing kicks off from as little as $4,000, with really nice examples asking anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000, leaving thousands of dollars left over to tweak and tune it to your heart's desire. Plus, even when it's not on track, the liftback means that these are super practical, it has a funky interior with sports seats, and being a Toyota, parts, support and aftermarket options are everywhere. Seriously, these things are hugely underrated. Unlike our next car, which are just rated like over and over and over again. Representing the small rear-wheel drive category, it's the Mazda Mx-5 or the Miata. Head to your local track and you'll quickly notice that the Mx-5 Miata has pretty much become the go-to track car of choice. Small, light, affordable, reliable and rear-wheel drive, and with an enormous fan base and support network, it's no wonder that the fun little Mazda has won over those wanting to take their driving seriously. And I am one of those converts. I honestly had no interest in the Mx-5 until I drove one, and now I own one, and the review for it is up there somewhere. But with 4 generations to choose from, which one should you buy? Well, at this budget, look, forget the most recent ND models as they're asking north of $25,000. But for less than $15,000, yes, a few high kilometre and tired NA models will be available, but as cool as they are, look, we'd be skipping ahead to either NB or NC MX-5s. The NB is arguably a nicer car to actually drive over the classic NA, while the least loved and appreciated of the MX-5 family, the NC, is easier and more forgiving to live with on a daily basis. Basically, if you want a track car that can still perform some daily duties, get an NB. If you want a hugely fun road car that relishes in the occasional track day, get an NC. But look, honestly, really, any MX-5 is a brilliant thing. They were designed from scratch to offer pure driving pleasure, and on track, they are an absolute riot. Just ignore those fitted with an automatic transmission. Okay, next up, we had to have an all-wheel drive option, and it is a bit of an obvious choice, but it does come with a warning. It's the Subaru Impreza Wrx. The warning is this: at this price point, steer clear of the 2.5 litre models. Subaru has quite the nasty reputation when it comes to head gasket failures, and we can pretty much thank the 2.5 litre or the EJ25 engines for that. So stick with the 2 litre, and one that hasn't been modified or tuned to within an inch of its life and has been maintained correctly, and you'll have far better odds for longevity. Therefore, the model we're talking about for this budget will be the second generation 2000 to 2005 Wrx in either the pre-facelift bug-eye or the post-facelift blob-eye form. Okay, look, yes, the iconic first generation GC8 Wrx was also fitted with these 2 litre engines, but good ones of those are well and truly north of this budget these days. But back to these second generation Imprezas, these things are easier to live with on a daily basis, they offer more safety equipment than the previous generation, and they also have a more rigid body shell, meaning that all the aftermarket suspension equipment that you will fit will actually show some genuine results. And you will need to fit aftermarket suspension and brakes and tyres, because in standard form, these things can be a bit of a wet sponge around a track. And please, if you are going to take one of these things to the track and you are going to spend money on it, before you even think about tuning the engine for more power, just sort the handling and braking out first. There's no point in having 500 horsepower if you're going to understeer off the track at the very first corner. But with the suspension sorted and all-wheel drive, not only will this thing be respectable at the track in the dry, it will more than prove its worth the moment the conditions get slippery. Plus, this then opens up the possibilities of competing competitively in gravel and loose surface events. Now, if you happen to own one of these cars and you also happen to live in Newcastle or Sydney or somewhere nearby and you'd be happy to see it featured on ReDriven, can you let us know in the comments, because we'd love to feature it on ReDriven. Also, if you're enjoying this video and ReDriven in general, can you do us a favour and give those like and subscribe buttons a little bit of a tickle? And if you want to be notified for when part 2 of this series drops, just hit that bell button. Now, representing the slightly larger rear-wheel drive category, well, surely it has to be the E36 or E46 BMW 3 Series, doesn't it? Well, it's not. It's the Lexus Is-250. Now, before all of the BMW fanboys start sending us death threats, let us explain. If we'd researched, written, and published this video a few years ago, it pretty much goes without saying that the more performance-focused E36 and E46 BMW 3 Series models would have taken out this category easily. But the thing is, a lot has changed recently. These days, good examples of, say, 328 and 330i's are now asking well over $15,000, and even swapping a more powerful engine into a lesser E36 or E46 body shell is getting increasingly more expensive. Not to mention some of the reliability horror stories that we've encountered when these conversions are not done correctly. So instead, if you want a rear-wheel drive, practical car with punchy performance, a manual transmission, excellent reliability, and with a few tweaks, some genuine track day chops, the Lexus Is-250 fits the bill. Look, okay, yes, finding manual examples will be a challenge. When standard, dynamically, they're not an obvious track day choice. And okay, they're not all that quick in a straight line, but they have proven reliability. As they are fundamentally a Toyota, parts will be inexpensive and easy to source. Their chassis balance is a near perfect 50-50 split. And with a few suspension and brake upgrades, a light tune to the engine, and some sticky rubber fitted, will make for quite the dark horse at the track. And when they're not at the track, you'll be wrapped in a lovely leather interior, you'll fly under the radar with the subtle and classy looks, and with pricing kicking off from around about $10,000, these things offer so much car for the money. Look, yes, you can pick up an E46 325i for well under $15,000, but the thing is, the Is-250 has more power and torque, with a few suspension mods will more than match the 325i for driver feel and feedback, and again, we're talking track days here, so reliability does need to be taken into account, and it's very hard to beat Lexus for build quality and longevity. Now, we want to know what cars would have made up your top 5 for this category, and also, what cars do you think should make it into part 2 for next week? It's going to be $15,000 to $30,000. Let us know in those comments. Also, remember, can you please hit all those important buttons? That'd be awesome. See you next time. We have done our best. That was terrible. There is no outright. Start from the top of that. That was so shit. Now we need to add in an honourable. Oh, here we go. A word I can't say. Honourable. And it has. And you also happen to live in Sydney or Newcastle or somewhere nearby. Somewhere nearby. You fucking idiot. And remember, I struggle to say remember, Cal. Remember the time. Well, surely it has to be the E36 or E40 fucking. That was the one.